Hello, this is Kerry-Ann, and welcome to another episode of the Carry On Friends podcast. This is episode 30. This episode is brought to you by Audible.com. Just for you, the listeners of Carry On Friends, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. Now, for the last 2 years, I've been using or listening to Audible, and I have so many favorites. One of my favorites, Not for Everyday Use by Trinidadian author Elizabeth Nunes. Another favorite is The Alchemist. It's read by Jeremy Irons. He's like a veteran British actor. Alchemist by itself is a really great book, but as an audiobook, it makes it even awesome. So to download your free Audible book today, go to carryonfriends.com/audible. If you listen to one of these two books, I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Just go to carryonfriends.com/audible and get your free book today. All right? Cool. Welcome to the Carry On Friends podcast, where you'll be inspired and empowered to do amazing things in your personal lives, career, business, and community. With your host, Kerry-Ann Reed Brown. All right, for this episode of the podcast, I have a guest with me, Alysia Christiani of the website Rewind and Come Again. And Rewind Come Again is one of my favorite Caribbean cultural blogs. And Alysia is no stranger to the podcast. She was actually here back in June when we did an episode on Caribbean Heritage Month. Alysia, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, we're doing the episode a little different because we had a little technical issue. So we are using one mic. So we're going to project. And if Alysia duck out a little bit, it's because she's naturally soft-spoken. But not to worry. The topic is going to be a great topic today. The topic of the show is being unapologetically Caribbean American. Why it's important and why you should care. And I wanted Alysia because she has a culture blog and we just love it. And she is one of the best people I could think of for having this conversation. Now, why are we talking about this? As a background, a few weeks ago, someone asked me about the podcast and why I focus on Caribbean American. And I'm like, what do you mean by why? I'm Jamaican. I was born there. I went to high school. I did all sorts of things there. I came to this country when I was 14, and I have very strong ties to my friends in Jamaica. And naturally, as a Jamaican or a Caribbean person in New York, not just New York, but Brooklyn, you know, our culture is a badge of honor, it's a stripe. We're that proud. And so why wouldn't I celebrate that pride on the podcast? So this is why this episode is into being. And Alysia is going to help me talk about why it's just important, not just for me, but for other content creators, Caribbean Girls Who Blog, Style and Vibes, Soca Mom, and all these other blogs with our awesome colleagues and collaborators, why we focus on Caribbean culture. Right, Alysia?
Exactly.
Great. So, Alysia, why do you think it's important that this podcast, why the podcast focuses on Caribbean American entrepreneurs and just a Caribbean American career focus? Why is that important? And why should anyone else care that the podcast Rewind and Come Again focuses on the Caribbean American diaspora or demographic?
Well, I think, one, it makes you stand out from the crowd because there are a million other blogs, websites, podcasts out there. And so it's important to cover a subject that is close to your and dear to your heart. So if your culture, your heritage, where you come from is important to you and it's a part of your life, why would you ignore it in the work that you do? Why would you ignore it even if your content is about finance, if it's about career, if it's about motherhood? If your culture informs that, why wouldn't you address that? Right. And also, Caribbean Americans are a force
I tell you.
in America, in New York, and in Brooklyn in particular, right? We're a large audience with a lot of power, and the mainstream in general is not speaking to us.
Exactly.
they're not we have very specific needs, very specific issues and problems. And what you cover in entrepreneurship and business, there are very particular things that, stereotypes or preconceived notions or how to navigate the business world that will be very specific to us, that other communities or the mainstream community might not have an issue with. Right. So it's important that you're doing a service that other people are not providing by focusing in on this population. And that's why it's important that you call it out.
Right. And part of that was also due to a lack of representation on the web, right? So you will not have a problem, and we said this in the last episode that you were here, you'll not have a problem finding some website that celebrates carnival, dancehall, dancing, or movies, right? Entertainment is covered. We have that covered. There's a million and one, not necessarily, even podcasts, because there are podcasts with top 10s, and there are lots of blogs who will cover that will cover that. But there won't be a lot of platforms that will speak to a Caribbean American's or a Caribbean person's experience in the workplace.
Right.
There won't be too many platforms that focuses on entrepreneurship or developing entrepreneurship, specifically to Caribbean Americans. So it was important for me because that was what I was looking for, and when I went to look for that, I didn't find that. And that is why Kerry-Ann Friends focuses on entrepreneurship, career, and we also celebrate culture. It's where career, entrepreneurship, and culture intersect, because it's part of us. We can't separate culture. Right. It is so in our blood. It goes through our veins so deeply, and it's important that we give voice and we spotlight and celebrate other Caribbean Americans that are doing great things. I mean, Paul C. Brunson was on the show. He's great.
That was an amazing episode.
Thank you. The woman the other day, I can't remember her name, that was promoted for Home Depot.
Oh, yes.
That was great,
yeah.
Right? And it's great, and we celebrate it because when I went to my Facebook, about 1 million people shared that article about this woman. I have to find her name. What's her name?
But I did also see some blowback where people were like, just because she's Jamaican, why is everyone going crazy? Like, so what?
But this is it. We're going crazy because we don't see it very often.
Right.
It's like we want to celebrate it. So she's doing good. It's perfect example. You are going someplace, or this happens to me all the time in Brooklyn. I'm talking to someone and you hear that little inflection of an accent. The minute you hear it, you switch.
Right.
Like, what's going on? They're talking. It's like this unspoken thing that you
recognize a fellow.
Like, oh, you come from the islands, so all right, cool. So for us, we celebrate that. But we shouldn't wait to celebrate someone only because they're internationally or nationally recognized. They had to come from someplace else, right? They had to work really hard to get there.
Right.
So what Kerry-Ann Friends does, we will spotlight the Paul C. Brunsons and the Michael Lee Chin, should he ever come on the show. That will be so awesome. But we also want to talk about the other entrepreneurs they're having challenges, because it's not always going to be a success story.
Right.
There has to be a story that conveys a challenge, because if we keep telling success stories, then I'm doing a disservice and not managing your expectations, because it's not going to be successful out the gate. It's especially hard. We will take on the challenge as Caribbean Americans because that's what we do. Being an entrepreneur is in our blood. But we also have to manage that. We are not trying to be an entrepreneur in the Caribbean, selling what we can sell to get by. We are competing in a global economy.
Right.
And we have other people who are tech savvy, they just know a lot of things. So you also need to be aware of the challenges. I'm looking forward to profiling a childhood friend of mine, David, who has a t-shirt line. He's had this line for years, and he's had some challenges. The brand isn't where he wants it to be. He's had some challenges, but you can benefit from his story because now everyone has a t-shirt line.
Right.
And you think that, I'm just going to come out with a t-shirt line and it sells money. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
There's a lot of work that gets into having a successful t-shirt line, bag line, even the journal. I came out with a journal and it does well, but there's still a lot of journals that need to be sold. Your expectations need to be managed. You need to understand there's some things that I probably should have done differently. But
also as an entrepreneur, you need to use every tool in your kit to get you where your next step, where you want to go, right? So a lot of people do not see culture and heritage as a viable tool to be used.
Yes.
They don't think of it that way. They think, I'm Grenadian, I'm Bahamian. What does that have to do with me trying to sell XYZ or produce this product? It can be a selling point.
Right.
Depending on, your industry and how you want to position yourself, you can use this to gain a whole new audience. You can use this to gain new vendors, position yourself apart from the pack of, if you're developing apps, maybe your cultural heritage can inform that and get you a whole new audience. So a lot of times people, they don't even think about it. They're whatever they are at home, but when they step out into the workplace, their office or whatever, they leave it behind when it can be a valuable tool that can help differentiate them, get them a whole new audience, a whole new way of thinking. And I like that what you're doing is helping people to think that way.
Thank you. And Paul said that at the end of his episode, I asked him about being an immigrant and from the Caribbean. And he said, because you're from a smaller place, you are uniquely equipped to see things differently because of those restraints that we had. But most of us aren't really using that. Like you said, I'm using as part of my culture, I work very hard and I get things done, but I'm not necessarily using that I'm Jamaican and people are like, oh, wow, you're from a small country and you're able to do this. Tell me more. I literally watched a YouTube video with Carla A. Harris, and she said she hated when people said, oh, this is Carla A. Harris and she's a gospel singer. She has that. She's like, I don't want people to know that. I'm a banker. I'm smart. I'm this. I'm quantitative. I don't want to talk about that. But she recognized that when, she went to certain clients, their eyes lit up because she was a singer. They're like, oh, wow, my daughter is interesting. Or culture can be that conversation piece that allows other people. Like, how many times have I said, oh, I'm from Jamaica. I went to an interview and it's like, yeah, I got married in Jamaica last year. And they're like, which part? And you start going into these conversations.
Icebreaker, foot in the door.
Exactly. And it doesn't work everywhere. You'll know that, but it shouldn't be something that we are, I don't think we're ashamed of it, but we literally just treat it as this is a part of ourselves that we just do not show to anyone and it stays at home. And sometimes that's a disservice because when I used to manage a team of paralegals, I had college students come in from different schools, Baruch and John Jay, and I remember this one young man, he came in and I asked a question about one of his weakness, and you know what he said to me his weakness was? His accent.
Oh, wow.
He said his accent, and I got it. Because as immigrants, we have that accent and we try to speak the proper English. Right. And then you're less focused on what you're saying. You're more focused on how you're saying it. And then you start sounding weird. His insecurity or his weakness was his accent. And I had to say to him, I said, how long have you been in this country? It was probably not a good question to ask. Right. But that was the opportunity for me as a Jamaican who came to this country a long time ago, having that experience, but in high school. But in high school it was different because then everybody wanted to be Jamaican. Right. But I said to him, I've been in this country for a long time. You're concerned about your accent. You will work on that over time. But I said, do not ever say that's your weakness. Right. Don't ever say that's your weakness because then you're saying you are weak because your culture is you. There's nothing you can do about this. You were born into this culture. So, and a lot of the kids coming over, they're probably having the same thing when they go on interviews. They're like, oh, the little Trini
they want
accent.
To fit in. They want to meld. They want to...
Exactly, fitting in. And in this economy, in this world, you cannot fit in. No. You have to stand out. Yeah. And if your accent is going to let you stand out, then that's what's going to let you stand out. Right. Your culture is going to let you stand out. That's what's going to let you stand out. But like Paul said, some people could just walk in and beat chest, I'm Jamaican, give me the job. Some people, it doesn't work like that. But you have to know how to do that. And that's what we try to do with Kerry-Ann Friends. Provide you with the resources to help you figure out how you're going to use who you are to your benefit. You, again, Carla A. Harris, I should put that in the show notes. Yes, she's not Caribbean American. And, I'll clarify that in a minute. She said that's your competitive advantage. No one else can be you. Right. Right. So you just have to be you. And I think for so many years, we enjoy being us when it comes to Usain running, to Bob Marley, Sean, whoever it is, I sing, we are Jamaican, we're West Indian, we're this, when Labor Day come and whatever. But in the workforce, we've just been cultured, socialized to blend in. Right. hold your head down and just go about your way.
And that doesn't do you any service
at
all.
Exactly.
And I think another side to that is from where I'm sitting. I'm not from Guyana, right? My parents are, but I'm claiming that heritage is mine,
It's
right?
yours.
So there's another piece to that puzzle where sometimes people are like, well, you're not really from, or, so how are you claiming, why you, I had an aunt ask me, why are you writing this Caribbean American blog? Why are you writing about this? You're not Caribbean. I was like, I'm of Caribbean heritage. That's how I describe myself. I'm of Guyanese heritage. I don't feel it's right to call myself Guyanese, but I'm of the heritage and I'm claiming it. So, but she was adamant that you're not from here. You cannot claim it. And I get, the sanctity and the importance of the heritage, but if it's in you, if it's part of you, if your mother, father, grandfather, great-grandfather came from there and you find some affinity, you don't have to grow up there to be of the culture and to use it as in your toolbox when you're providing whatever service or providing whatever product it is you do. So I will not come out and say, I'm Guyanese and I'm writing about the Guyanese experience. I'm writing about the Caribbean American experience. And it's important for me, though, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, I don't walk around necessarily all day, every day. I'm a Guyanese. I'm a Guyanese, right? I don't walk around, but it's so imbued in me. Like, I don't even have to think about it, So when I naturally start to get my little bit of accent when I'm around other West Indians or certain foods and cultural things come up, I just naturally identify with. So then, even though if you're not from the islands or the country that's in the Caribbean, but you have it in your family and you recognize it as part of your identity, I think it's important not to hide that either and think that I'm not really a part of the culture, so I can't use it to my advantage.
That's an interesting point. Is this a Caribbean thing? Because the Latinos, I don't think they have the problem because those kids are growing up bilingual. So
Right.
you can't tell them that, okay, maybe they were born in Brooklyn, but they speak Spanish fluently.
Right.
So you can't tell them that
They eat
they're
the food,
not.
they celebrate
Exactly.
the holidays, so I don't see that it's any different for us.
Exactly. When I first came to this country, I tell you, I went to George Wingate High School. It no longer exists.
Oh, my cousin went there.
Oh my God, Wingate was the CARICOM of
Yes.
like every country, Caribbean country was represented there. And I remember my first class, Garfield, and I sat in that health class, and I remember down to my outfit that day, and I sat in the class, and he turned to me and he said, "Hi, I'm Jamaican. Do you know where Jamaica is?" And I just bust out laughing.
Oh my gosh.
Because I guess it's because you'd have to understand the culture at that time. Everybody was from Jamaica, but when you ask them specifically where they came from, from Kingston, or like, where in Kingston? Oh, I don't remember. So I kind of get where this whole, you have to be from there and you want to represent that. But if I asked you where specifically you come from, it's not to discredit that you're not from Jamaica. It's because I want to know more, because maybe I know someone who lived in your neighborhood or wherever.
Right.
But I think if your parents, look at it from the very simplistic standpoint. Your parents are American, you're born in Germany, you're American.
Right.
It doesn't matter. You are allowed to take your parents wherever their country of citizenship is. You can take that. So Caribbean American, Caribbean, it's also a way of life.
Right.
It's just how we do things.
Right.
At work, I work in the most diverse company I've ever worked in my life. I was just telling Alysia before we started recording, it's the place where Guyanese outnumber Jamaicans like 2 to 12, literally, right? And a Trini person just started. So now we have 2 Trini or 3 Trini people working there. Anyway, so I'm sitting as a project manager, we're sitting in our side of the office, and I'm like, my hand scratch me. Somebody said, "Yeah, go get money."
No, not a thought.
Not a thought. Like, oh, you're getting money. But, and my boss, he said, "What?" It's like, "Yeah, when your hand is scratching you, we think you're going to get money." I called my other coworkers, "My hand is scratching you. What's happening?" "Oh, you're going to get money." Like, everyone knew that my hand is scratching. It doesn't matter which hand at this point. It's scratching money. So, it's just this way of life, these inherent, these built-in things that we all can identify with.
And that's why I think when you have spaces online or in person that embrace and amplify this voice, this Caribbean American voice, it's also important, because if I'd worked once a long time ago at a law firm, and one of the secretaries, I don't know if she was Haitian or Jamaican or something. She was from the West Indies. I'm not sure where. But I remember it was lunchtime, and she had brought saltfish for lunch. So she went to heat it up.
Oh, Lord.
Right. Me and her, I think, were like one of the only two, maybe there was one or two other black people in the office, period. And then, so being black in an all-white office is one thing, but then to be Caribbean on top of that, like you're like a different kind of black that they didn't quite understand. So she's heating up her food. Not a thing to me, but it's quite pungent. Yeah. Everyone in there lost their minds. And I don't know if this could happen now, but HR told her that she could not bring that in. She could not have saltfish for her lunch ever again. She could not have it in the office. It was too strong a smell. And beyond that, she felt humiliated because they were talking about it for weeks after. And I understood why it is a strong smell, but, aside from me, she didn't have anyone to talk to about that, to confide in, and to, how to talk about how she felt. So it's very helpful to find places and spaces where people will understand your very specific need or whatever it is you're going through. Because as Caribbeans, we're going to have things that we go through that no one else is really going to get.
No one's going to get it. I had an experience too. As Caribbean Americans, we're either one of two things, and I also mentioned this in the episode with Policy Brunson. We work, we're there to work, we hold our head down, we're not there to socialize, and how we socialize has nothing to do with you personally. It's usually to do with us. So if we don't talk to you, it's because maybe we don't like you, but we're still polite to you.
Right.
We are not, for the most part, I can't speak for anyone else, I'm not the chatty type.
Yeah.
If I'm chatty at my job now, it's because I really like the people. It's such a multicultural workspace. So there's always this conversation about culture. Almost every conversation we have, it's about our culture because we're so different. So I worked in a space where I was polite. I'd say hello. I'd say good morning. But I will not just get up and just have a conversation with you. Right. And I'm not going to lie. I didn't like you because I spotted how you can spot the people in the workspace that are going to do certain things, right? So you have one of two Caribbean Americans. You're going to do like a major hype and cuss them off, and we're not going to do that.
Right.
Or I think what major hype does, as a sidebar, is he does what we really want to do, but we can't really do it.
Right.
So
that's why he's so funny.
Yeah, because it's like, you really want to say that, but you can't. And so when I do my work, when I say hello, I do the right amount of interaction. I know it's not great for my career because it's about power broking and networking within the office.
Right.
But like we said in the Caribbean, if my spirit can't take you, I'm just not going to do it. And I see how that's affected my career. And I've seen how people not understanding my type of black, right? And I'm very sensitive about it because no one sees the difference. If they see me walking, I'm black. They do not know that I'm Jamaican, or they don't know if I'm Afro-cute. They don't know anything about me. I'm just black.
Right.
And it's not their fault they don't understand the different nuances about my culture, which is why I needed to do Carry-On Friends, because we have to understand that they just see black. They don't really care.
Right.
No one cares. Even another black person doesn't know that, she has an accent, but everyone with an accent is Jamaican.
Right.
Everyone with an accent isn't Jamaican. So even going even further and drilling further down, no one really knows or really cares. So you have to then, know how to react or communicate accordingly, how you adjust, because it's not all the time we can expect them to accommodate. So we have to then adjust to their understanding, because it's just, is it worth the battle to fight?
Right.
So again, it's then using this inside knowledge that, okay, I can be this person, I could be that person, and how I'm going to use this with the right person, right? It's how you treat that person or have a conversation with that person, because maybe that person isn't ready to connect with part of the culture. It gets very complicated, which is why I had to do this, because it's never clear cut. It's never straightforward. It's just, there's just so many different things that affect how, like, I would love to talk to, her name is Anne-Marie Campbell, to see how she navigated that corporate culture to get where she is, because I can tell you, navigating as a person from the Caribbean or Caribbean American in a corporate culture is not easy.
Right. I'm sure she came across so much, not just your garden variety racism or, or sexism as a woman, but then also once people, I've found a lot of times once people find out, oh, you're from where? Your parents are from where? You get a little fetishized, you know? Oh, let me hear you. Can you do the accent?
Yes.
Can you do the accent? Can you,
yes.
have you ever, you know, and it can, now that's a whole nother thing you don't learn in your average, you know, how to get along in the workplace or how to do business when you have people now treating you as some kind of exotic thing.
It's true.
And so now that's why, you know, spaces like this are important, because that, where else are you going to have that conversation and get that advice?
That's true. All the time. I mean, when I'm at work, I'll tell you this true story. So no one calls me at work from my family because we all have cell phones. You just text. But in 2007, 2008, smartphones weren't really where they are now. You still call up, you know, like call at work. So I got a phone call and I answered the phone. I said, you know, announce myself, blah, blah, blah. I heard the accent in the person's voice. And the person asked for me. This man asked for me. So in my head, I'm like, is which Jamaican man calling, missing calling, asking for me? I don't really recognize who it was because it wasn't my husband. And so I'm like, me not owe no bill. So who is this calling me? And no one has, you know, but these are the conversations that go through your head really quickly. So I said, this is Kerry-Ann. And then it was my brother-in-law. And then he says, my God, I can't recognize your voice. But it's this code switching that we do. And then when you build professional relationships, and a lot of us, we build professional relationships without seeing the other person for years, or you have clients, you don't really see them. And when they finally see you, they're like, wow, you look nothing like how you sound on the phone. And somewhere in the conversation, you're like, yeah, you know, I'm from Jamaica. They're like, Jamaica, Queens? I'm like, no, Jamaica, the island. They're like, oh, wow. How long, you know, it's then this interest as to, how do you live in the cold? I'm like, you know.
Like you do with the jacket?
Like, you know, I can say I don't like it. My favorite saying is like, I'm a Caribbean queen, not meant to be an ice princess. It was just.
I like that.
You know, but it's then this interest into, how did you get here? Why did you come here?
Yeah.
You don't sound Jamaican, or, you know, like.
It gets into a whole.
Yeah, like.
I get a lot of, oh, my nanny's from Guyana. And I'm like, great. One of my old jobs, people used to bring their nannies to work with them. Sometimes, like, they bring the kid with them, whatever. Right. It's like, oh, did you know that her family's from Guyana, too? And I'm like, and we're looking at each other like, hey, like, this is awkward. This is weird.
Yeah.
So, you know, no one else is going to be able to talk to
to understand that. You know, I wanted to go back to something that I said, you know, in terms of being a podcast, a blog that focuses on entrepreneurship and career for Caribbean Americans, I reference Carla A. Harris. I'll reference other entrepreneurs who are not Caribbean American. It doesn't mean that I'll only focus on people who are from the Caribbean Americans. My guests on the show are probably mostly going to be Caribbean Americans. People who I spotlight will be mostly Caribbean Americans. But the difference here is these other successful entrepreneurs and public figures, the Carla A. Harris, you know, the Steve Jobs, the Bill Gates, their wisdom is their wisdom. It is what it is. The difference between other platforms and this platforms is the application. How does it apply to cultural lenses? How from cultural perspective are we seeing this? How can we apply this? Because everyone is doing the same thing. Right. It's just that we don't know that. Right. You know, so what Carla A. Harris does is different. It's going to be different from what Sheryl Sandberg does. You know, it's really you have race, culture, and you have gender. And how do we apply what they have to say to our circumstances? Right. And that's really the key difference. So yeah, I'll put Carla A. Harris's speech to take the lead because I think it's a really powerful speech. And how are you then going to take that and apply it? What's your competitive advantage? How are you as a Caribbean descent, wherever you are in the diaspora, how are you going to apply this to your circumstances? This is what we aim to do. Help you take this knowledge that's widely available on all these other platforms and apply it to your circumstances. Because all application isn't equal. It's just we certain things will just not work for us. There's certain things that we just cannot do. So I think that's important. We will spotlight and showcase other Caribbean Americans and their experiences. And again, even within their experiences, how can we apply it to our experiences? Because, you know, Michael Lee Chin started out in a different time that we're starting out. It's extremely competitive right now because when you go out there, if you're a graphic artist or whoever, you're not just competing with the person in Brooklyn or New York City or New York State or in the Northeast. You're competing with the person in Vietnam. You're competing with the person in London. It's how are you going to equip yourself to survive in this global economy? The global community is like shrinking, like literally Ghana is right next door. It's that's just how we operate. And as a culture, our pride is just what makes us visible. But how are we going to use our competitive advantage of our culture to build stronger brands, businesses, and shameless plug for Caribbean Digital Divas, which is coming up, and that's a panel discussion on branding for Caribbean American businesses. But these platforms are needed because in a world of so many other voices, or it just seems like we're just like literally quiet. Yeah, that's what it feels like to me. We're there. I hear it amongst other content creators, but it's not as loud as I think it should be and matches what I know is happening because everyone's head down and, well, I'm going to try and make our Islamic things go on,
And also, as we were talking about before we got on, what I find a lot of times is in the Caribbean community, Caribbean diaspora, people are lurkers, right? Yeah. They don't pop their head up, but they're watching you. Yeah. They're watching you. So if we didn't have voices and spaces like this, people would still be floating around, picking what they can out of the mainstream areas and trying to make it work for them. But now, even though they may not be, loud and proud as some of us are, they may not wear their heritage on their sleeves. Right. They may be working at places 20, 30 years and people not really know where they're from and what they're about. They're not, beating their chest, but their culture still informs them and how they move through their business. So when these spaces pop up, they're paying attention. Right. They're going through the site. They're listening to the podcast. They're gathering information and using other people's experiences to help them through their day as well. So there's a large silent majority that we're meeting their needs, and we may not know it. Right. But we're meeting their needs, and we may help them get through a situation, or how am I supposed to? I'm in Brooklyn and my vendors don't really know I'm of Caribbean heritage, but maybe I can use it now to up my prices or offer something new, or maybe this is an into a new client that I always wanted to get to. So you never know who's paying attention just because we don't know. I feel like most of the people I meet in Brooklyn probably have some type of Caribbean heritage. Absolutely. If they're born and came here first, second, third generation, but a lot of times people don't speak about it. So having these spaces is important to reach that audience well.
Thank you. And it goes back to the other point, because we're like the silent majority, you will not see or hear, because I sit on the board of my daughter's high school, former high school, and it focuses on technology for students. And one of the questions a new board member asked was, so one of the important things for any school, especially for a technical school, is they have to get internships. And where are they getting internships, and why aren't students following through on what they're learning in terms of technology when they go to college? And the reason why they're not following through is their parents see the traditional jobs as a better option, because their parents, whether they're and most of the kids in the school are from the Caribbean, they're Black, they're Spanish, and so those parents understand that you could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer. They do not understand what this whole new technology revolution is about. Right. So the parent is going to push the child for what the parent understands is to be a safe and a good career. Right. The challenge comes because the students need to be paired up with people who look like them, who are doing great jobs or making money or are successful. So if you aren't pairing up a student with another Black person who's an animator or someone multicultural, it's going to be very hard for them to connect how they could make this a long-term career. So I say that to say this, it applies to adults the same way. If you only see the Michael Lee Chins or the Usain Bolts or all these other people, there's a whole Caribbean sea between them and us. Like, how do we get there? So the goal is to spotlight other people who they're on their way there, but you also need to see them where they're starting out. Right. So what's possible. It's possible for you to start a podcast, because I'm a year into it, and if you're interested, I could tell you, we'll figure out that goes. But it's to show you what's possible, because before this, I didn't know that other people were doing a podcast. You know, before this, I didn't know that Julian Gordon, my teacher, his parents from Trelawney, Jamaica. Like, really?
Oh, really?
Yes!
I did not know that.
Girl, listen to that episode. His dad's from Trelawney. I'm like, what? what? You know, but it's in having these conversations, because you see what Julian is doing. And Julian is popular, not just in the blog world, but that's how we were initially introduced to him. But now you see the possibility. He's not wearing it on his shirt, but because of it's part of his culture, you're like, wow, you know, this exists. We can do this.
It's an inspiration.
It's an inspiration, exactly. So there's the inspirational aspect of that, because you want to be able to see, like, wow, that person looks like me. You see that in Karen Civil, right?
I love that woman.
You're like, what?
Oh my God.
Exactly, right? She's Haitian. She wears that, like, stripe.
I went to an event she spoke at once. It was in the front row, and like, she's just amazing. And is she Haitian or is she Haitian American? She's
probably Haitian American.
That's what I thought. So I was just blown away, because what I often have a hard time with is the balance, right? When I'm writing and when I'm presenting to my audience, how much is Caribbean and how much is American? Like, and I'm like, she does it effortlessly. You know, she's making moves in big spaces, but she's true to her heritage at the same time.
The reason why maybe for you it's a challenge, because you're thinking about it. She's not.
Right.
She's like, this is just who I am. Like,
right.
Every day, my boss says the same thing. Who are you talking to on the phone? And I'm laughing, like, what are you talking about? It's like, I heard you went into that other voice. You know, and you could laugh about that. But I think for me, the great part of that story is them understanding that you are this multi-dimensional person, and depending on your conversations, you have to switch. And it doesn't make you less of Kerry-Ann. It's just who I am. So you just have these conversations, and eventually people just understand and appreciate that. You know what? This is Alysia. And, you know, she'll talk American in a quick second. She'll drop some, you know, cheering and
right
there, you know, or I'll be at work, I go, and, you know, like, people get that. And in doing so, some people will appreciate it, because then they're now exposed, or they're to this other part of the culture, especially in New York City. I think for New York City, it's very easy, because people are exposed to all these different cultures.
Right.
So if you're in the Midwest, or you're someplace else, and you are doing something that someone doesn't necessarily understand, it's that opportunity to explain to them, like, you know what, this is just something that we do in the Caribbean. Not everyone is going to be comfortable, but at least you took an opportunity to educate someone.
Right.
And if they choose to not appreciate it, that's not on you. That's on them.
Right.
You're still being true to you. So, yeah, Karen is out there doing her thing. There's so many people doing that and embracing that this is their culture. And you know what? My culture made me who I am. And, you know, I remember when I first came to this country, there weren't too many Haitian Americans who were proud to say they were Haitian.
It was not cool to be Haitian back in the day. It was not
cool. And it was just like, except for my next door neighbors. I tell you, they were like, yes, I'm Haitian, and what? But, you know, for her, even further removed, right? Because, you know, she's much younger. It's like, wow, celebrate that. You know, really celebrate the culture and use that as your competitive advantage. And that's really what Carry-On Friends is about. Being unapologetically who you are from the Caribbean, whether you're representing Trinidad, Jamaica, Guyana, wherever you are
born, raised, came
or,
when you were little, your grandmother or your mother or whatever, it's part of you.
It is, and when you can't be anyone else but yourself,
right?
And you just have to be yourself in a way that's most authentic, and for you, and just, you know, do the best you can. Like, you know what? Not everyone is gonna be a convert. You know, it'll take them some time to catch up. But the minute you try to blend in is the minute that you are replaceable at work.
Yeah, we don't live in that world anymore.
Exactly.
We did. I distinctly remember my mother giving me very specific instructions. When you're in this house, you can speak how you want. I don't care. When you leave this house, when you're in school, when you're at work, you must speak proper English, right? And when I would call her at work, Mommy, we're home. I didn't know who it was. I was like, Mommy, oh yeah. And then she would dip in and
which is like the brother-in-law story.
Exactly.
Like, hello.
So, you got to live your truth. And, if you're not there yet, or if you don't feel comfortable, I get it. Sometimes that's not who you are. But understand that this, is something that as you need, you can dip into your toolbox and pull this out in your journey to entrepreneurship or owning your own business or selling your product or services. This is definitely something that I believe you should not downplay.
Right. And as we wrap up, your culture, I've heard a lot of stories where people talk about products or services or even cultural things like music video, the Justin Bieber video, right? Where you're taking the culture and someone else is making money from your culture. You can't get upset with that if you don't want to share or tell people that, what, this is who I am. I love to sing.
Right.
And, there was a lively discussion on Rihanna's work. Rihanna is a pop star. Right? She didn't come out as a calypso star, a soca star, or a dancehall star. She came out as a pop star. But when the opportunity happens on every album, there is a song that is a reflection of her culture.
That's a great example.
Every album. So everyone's talking about work. Before that, Man Down.
Right.
Before that was Rude Boy.
Yes.
So she everything has always been that. So I'm not saying everything should be Caribbean, but in Rihanna's perfect example, there's always something she uses to celebrate who she is or from the Caribbean. And sometimes it's not even in the music. It's sometimes publicly like mega crap over.
Right. Right.
Yo.
Just a reminder in case you forgot.
Yeah, crap over time will come. Carnival outfit, sauce out and everything. It's these little things that you do to celebrate your culture. And so when Justin Bieber and all of them are talking about this tropical thing, like no, don't get it twisted. It's dancehall. It's just straight dancehall. And you look at Skrillex and Diplo and all of these people who they go to Jamaica and they have big rays and everything, and they take what they've learned and they bring it back and they capitalize on that. You cannot get upset that someone else is capitalizing on something that you have not tried to do, or we're still in that space of blending in.
Right.
So we have to also take our own culture, understand our cultural brand, which is what we'll be talking about at Style and Vibes presents Caribbean Digital Divas on March 21st. Get your March 24th. Get your tickets, CaribbeanDigitalDivas.com, for more of these conversations on branding, because it's needed, especially now. Yep. It's really needed. So that is why Kerry-Ann Friends is unapologetically Caribbean American. I'm unapologetically Jamaican. And it is important because it's part of my identity, who I am. And it's part of my competitive advantage, the way I will stand out in this world, not just in work, not only in business, but just the way I stand out. And even in a country with other Jamaicans, I'm just going to stand out because,
And in this digital space especially, it's so accessible now. Whereas before, there were a lot more obstacles to getting into business, into doing business. Now you need a laptop,
internet connection.
And you're good.
You're good.
And so are a billion other people, right? So what are you going to do to make yourself stand out from the crowd? Why would you sit on this valuable commodity of yours, and because you don't want the questions, or why would you do that?
Right.
Unapologetically Caribbean.
Unapologetically, yes. So I'm so glad that you came on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
We're using the one mic because my little mixer, something was going on.
It's all right. Did it work? It worked in.
We sorted out. So thank you for listening. If you have not connected with us on any part of social media, please connect with me on Twitter and Instagram at Kerry-Ann Friends, Facebook, Kerry-Ann Friends Official, and you could connect with Alysia at
rewindandcomeagain.com is the site. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Raka, RACA blog, and also on Facebook, Rewind and Come Again.
So I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we'd love to hear from you. Tweet us, check out the website, leave a comment. If you lurk, that's great, but just give us a little one line so we know that you're there. Just say, oi, heal, a little heal by is good. Like heal, like everything good. All right, so until next time, walk good. Oh, before I finish that, so I said walk good because it's a Caribbean, I can't say Caribbean, it's a Jamaican thing, right? So when I say walk good, it's like, be careful, have a safe journey. That's really what it means. So until the next time you listen to me on the podcast, I hope that things work great for you. You're safe, your family's safe, whatever it is, just walk good. All right?
Okay, friends, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Kerry-Ann Friends podcast. For a recap of this episode and other great articles, please visit the blog at www.kerryonfriends.com. That's CarryonFriends.com. The Kerry-Ann Friends podcast is produced by Breadfruit Media, and new episodes are available every other Tuesday morning. You can listen to the podcast on the website, carryonfriends.com, or you can listen on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, or wherever you like to listen to your podcast.